My husband left after landing his dream job, thinking I held him back. But his new life. My name is Sarah, and for 10 years, Mark was my world. We met in college, two awkward souls fumbling through life, and somehow we just clicked. We built a comfortable life together in a quiet suburb. I worked as a graphic designer, mostly from home, which gave me the flexibility to manage the house and our two goofy golden retrievers, Buster and Daisy. Mark was a good man, a steady presence. He worked in accounting, a bit of a numbers guy, but with a surprisingly warm heart underneath his spreadsheets. Life wasn't always exciting, but it was ours. We had our routines, Friday night pizza, Sunday morning hikes with the dogs, and those comfortable silences in between where you just know you're with your person. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Or so I thought. About 6 months ago, things started to shift. Mark had been gunning for a senior position at his company for ages. It was a long shot, a real step up, and honestly, I wasn't sure he'd get it. He was good at his job, reliable, but maybe not the most flashy or assertive guy in the office. But then, out of the blue, he got it. The promotion, senior financial analyst with a corner office and a hefty pay raise. We celebrated, of course. I was genuinely thrilled for him. This was something he'd worked so hard for. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. He was working longer hours, coming home tired but buzzing with energy. He'd talk about new projects, important meetings, and the influential people he was now working with. It was exciting to see him so invigorated. I made sure to have his favorite meals ready, listened patiently to his work stories, and tried to be as supportive as possible. But slowly, the excitement started to morph into something else. Mark began to change. He started paying more attention to his appearance, which was fine, I guess. New suits, a gym membership he actually used, the whole 9 yards. But it wasn't just that. His attitude started to shift. He became distant, less engaged in our usual conversations. Our Friday night pizza nights became less frequent, replaced by late work dinners or networking events he couldn't miss. I tried to talk to him about it. "Honey, are you okay? You seem a bit stressed." He'd wave a hand dismissively. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just busy. This is a big opportunity for me. I need to focus." Focusing was one thing, but it felt like he was focusing on everything but me. He started making little comments, subtle at first, but they stung nonetheless. "Maybe we should redecorate the living room," he'd say, looking around our cozy, lived-in space with a slight wrinkle of his nose. "It looks a bit dated, don't you think? Not exactly the image I want to project now." Or he'd comment on my casual clothes. "Are you going to wear that out? Maybe something a little more sophisticated?" I usually worked from home in comfortable clothes. It wasn't like I was embarrassing him in public. The comments escalated. He started criticizing my cooking, saying it was too basic. He even made a snide remark about my career, suggesting that maybe I should try to do something more ambitious now that he was climbing the corporate ladder. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just feeling the pressure of his new role. Maybe he was just trying to improve himself, and I was being too sensitive. But deep down, a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. One evening, about 3 months after his promotion, he came home late, later than usual. I was already in bed reading. He walked into the bedroom, and I could tell something was different. He had this strange look on his face, a mix of nervousness and something else, something I couldn't quite place. He sat on the edge of the bed, avoiding my gaze. "Sarah," he began, his voice low. "We need to talk." My heart sank. I knew this was it. Whatever it wasn't going to be good. "What is it, Mark?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He finally looked at me, and the expression on his face was almost pitying. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately." He paused, took a deep breath, and then dropped the bomb. "I don't think this is working anymore." My mind went blank for a moment. "What? What are you talking about?" "Our marriage," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I don't think we're compatible anymore." Compatible? We'd been together for 10 years. We'd built a life together. We'd supported each other through thick and thin. How could we suddenly be incompatible? "Mark, that's insane," I said, my voice rising. "What's going on? Is there someone else?" He hesitated for a split second, just a flicker in his eyes, but it was enough. No, it's not like that," he said quickly, but I didn't believe him. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Why are you saying this?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Sarah, look at me. Look at where I am now. I'm a senior analyst. I'm meeting important people. I'm going places. And you're still here." He gestured vaguely around the room as if our home, our life together, was some kind of stagnant swamp. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "It means," he said, his voice taking on a condescending tone I'd never heard before, "that I've outgrown this. I've outgrown us. I need someone who's on my level, someone who understands the kind of life I'm living now." I stared at him, dumbfounded. Was this the man I'd spent the last 10 years with? The man who used to tell me I was his rock? His anchor? Now suddenly, I was holding him back? "So, what you're saying," I said slowly, trying to process his words, "is that because you got a promotion, you think you're too good for me now?" He winced slightly, as if I'd spoken a truth he didn't want to admit. "It's not about being too good," he said, but his tone betrayed him. "It's about evolving. I've evolved, Sarah, and you haven't." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "That's cruel, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. "That's incredibly cruel." "I'm just being honest," he said, standing up and pacing the room. "I deserve to be happy, and I don't think I can be happy here anymore." He wanted a divorce, just like that. After 10 years, he was walking away because he thought he deserved better. The audacity of it took my breath away. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, tearful phone calls with my mom, and a constant, dull ache in my chest. Mark moved out quickly, taking his new suits and his newfound sense of self-importance with him. He rented a sleek, modern apartment downtown, the kind of place he probably wouldn't have even looked at a year ago. He started posting pictures on social media, him at fancy restaurants, him at trendy bars, him with his new colleagues, all looking polished and sophisticated. It was like he was living in a completely different world, a world where I didn't belong. It hurt, seeing those pictures. It felt like he was rubbing it in my face, showing me how much better his life was without me. But beneath the hurt, a tiny spark of defiance began to flicker. He thought I was just going to sit around and mope? He thought I was going to let him rewrite our history, making me the villain who held him back? He was wrong. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects, pushing my creative boundaries. I reconnected with old friends, went out for dinners and drinks, and started doing things I'd put on hold for years. I even joined a photography class, something I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't easy. There were days when the loneliness hit me hard, when I missed the comfortable familiarity of our old life. But I refused to let Mark's sudden departure define me. I was more than just Mark's wife. I had my own life, my own passions, my own worth. As I started to heal, I also started to notice things. Little things at first. A comment from a mutual friend about how Mark seemed a bit intense lately. A picture on his social media where he looked a little too close to one of his female colleagues. Then came the real bombshell. A few weeks ago, my friend Lisa, who works in the same industry as Mark, bumped into him at a work event. She said he was with a woman, a very attractive woman, and they seemed very comfortable with each other. Lisa didn't know her name, but she got a good look at her. A few days later, Lisa sent me a link to the company's website. There was a team photo of Mark's department, and there she was, a woman with long blonde hair and a dazzling smile, standing right next to Mark. Her name was Chloe. Her title? Senior Marketing Manager. The pieces clicked into place. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in a more sophisticated lifestyle, the subtle digs about me not being on his level. It wasn't just about the job, it was about her. A wave of anger washed over me, hotter and more intense than anything I'd felt before. He hadn't just left because he thought he'd outgrown me. He'd left for someone else. He'd painted me as the obstacle in his path, the reason he couldn't achieve his full potential, when all along, he was just chasing after someone new. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the realization that the man I thought I knew, the man I'd loved and supported for so long, was capable of such blatant dishonesty. I looked at his social media again, at the pictures of him and Chloe, laughing and posing, living their best lives. A bitter taste filled my mouth. He thought he'd upgraded? He thought he'd found someone better? Maybe he had. But maybe, just maybe, he was in for a surprise. Because while he was busy trying to impress his new girlfriend and his fancy new colleagues, I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I was better off without him too. And his dream job might not be the fairy tale he thought it was. Armed with the knowledge of Chloe's existence, I felt a strange mix of anger and a perverse sense of clarity. It explained so much. The sudden shift in his priorities, the condescending remarks, the need for a sophisticated lifestyle. It wasn't about him outgrowing me. It was about him wanting someone new, someone he perceived as more fitting for his newfound status. I decided not to confront him directly, at least not yet. I needed more information. I started doing some digging online, not in a creepy, obsessive way, but just looking. Chloe's social media was public, filled with pictures of her glamorous life. Lots of travel, expensive clothes, and, of course, plenty of photos with Mark, beaming and looking every bit the successful executive. But as I scrolled through her posts, I started to notice something else. Beneath the surface of the perfect smiles and exotic locations, there was a certain artificiality. Everything seemed staged, curated. And Mark, in those pictures, often looked a little strained, like he was trying too hard to fit into this new, shiny world. Then, I stumbled upon an article in a local business publication. It was about Mark's company, and it mentioned some recent restructuring and budget cuts. I scanned the article, and my eyes landed on a paragraph that made my blood run cold. Due to the restructuring, several senior positions had been eliminated, including the senior marketing manager role, Chloe's role. A wave of grim satisfaction washed over me. So, the woman Mark had left me for, the woman he thought was his ticket to a better life, had lost her job. I wondered how that was impacting their perfect little world. I didn't have to wonder for long. A few weeks later, I received a text message from Mark. It was short, unexpected, and filled with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in months. "Sarah, can we talk?" My first instinct was to ignore it, to delete the message and pretend I hadn't seen it. But a part of me, the part that had spent 10 years sharing a life with this man, felt a flicker of curiosity, maybe? I replied, "What about?" His response came almost immediately. "It's complicated. Can we meet for coffee?" I hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "Fine. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at our usual spot." The next morning, I walked into the familiar coffee shop, the same one where Mark and I had our first date. He was already there, sitting at our usual table, looking different. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by a weariness that aged him. He hadn't shaved properly, and his expensive suit looked a little rumpled. He stood up when he saw me, and for a brief moment, I saw a hint of the old Mark in his eyes, the kind, slightly awkward guy I'd fallen in love with. "Sarah, thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice subdued. "Get to the point, Mark," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He sighed, running a hand through his hair again. "Things haven't been great." "Oh, really?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you were living the dream. Fancy job, fancy girlfriend, fancy life." He winced. "It's not what it seemed. Chloe, she lost her job." "I know," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. He looked surprised. "You do?" "The internet is a powerful tool, Mark, especially when people like to broadcast their perfect lives on it. He looked down at his hands. It's been tough. She's been different, stressed. And honestly, the job wasn't as amazing as I thought it would be. The pressure was immense, the hours were insane, and the people, well, let's just say it wasn't the supportive environment I was used to. He actually sounded regretful. It was almost pathetic. So, what does this have to do with me, Mark? I asked, cutting to the chase. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Sarah, I think I made a mistake. My heart skipped a beat, but I tried not to show it. A mistake? Leaving me? For a woman who lost her job and a high-pressure job that wasn't what you expected? It sounds bad when you put it like that, he admitted. But I was so caught up in the idea of it all. The status, the money, the image. I thought that was what I wanted. But it wasn't. What I really wanted, what I really needed, was you. He reached across the table and tried to take my hand, but I pulled it back. Don't, Mark. Sarah, please. I know I hurt you. I was arrogant and selfish. I thought I deserved better, but the truth is, I didn't. You were always the best thing in my life. You were my rock, my support. And I threw it all away for something that wasn't real. His words were almost convincing. Almost. But the memory of his condescending tone, the way he'd dismissed our life together, was still too fresh. You said I held you back, Mark, I reminded him. You said I wasn't on your level anymore. Do you remember that? He flinched. I know. I was an idiot. I was insecure and I projected it onto you. It wasn't fair. You were always amazing, Sarah. You were always enough. And now that your amazing new life has crumbled, you want to come crawling back? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. He nodded, shamefaced. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a second chance. Please, Sarah, I miss you. I miss our life. I miss Buster and Daisy. He did sound sincere, but could I trust him? Could I forget the hurt he'd caused me? Could I go back to being the person I was before he left? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw not the confident, successful executive he'd tried so hard to become, but the vulnerable, slightly lost man I'd met in college. A wave of sadness washed over me, not just for myself, but for him too. He'd chased after a mirage and ended up empty-handed. Mark, I said softly, I'm not the same person I was when you left. You changed me. You made me question everything, and in the process I realized that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I've started building a new life for myself, a life that doesn't depend on you or your approval. His face fell. So that's it? You're really done? I nodded slowly. Yes, Mark. I think I am. He didn't try to argue. He just sat there, looking defeated. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I understand. I don't blame you. I messed up. Royally. He stood up. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah. I hope you find happiness. I already am, Mark, I said, and for the first time since he'd left, I realized it was true. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, a strange sense of closure washing over me. It wasn't the triumphant ending I might have imagined a few months ago. There was no dramatic confrontation, no tearful reconciliation, just a quiet acknowledgement of the end of an era. Over the next few months, I finalized the divorce. It was surprisingly amicable. Mark didn't fight me on anything, seemed almost eager to just get it over with. I kept the house, the dogs, and started to truly embrace my new life. I threw myself into my photography, even started selling some of my prints online. I continued to grow in my design work, taking on bigger and more challenging projects. I traveled with friends, spent more time with my family, and rediscovered the joy in simple things. I did hear through mutual friends that Mark and Chloe eventually broke up. Apparently, without her job and the lifestyle it afforded, the cracks in their perfect facade started to show. He ended up moving back to the suburbs, into a smaller apartment, and last I heard, he was still working at his old company, albeit in a less prestigious role due to further restructuring. Sometimes I'd see his posts on social media, melancholic quotes about second chances and regrets. I never reached out. I'd moved on. I'd learned that chasing after an illusion of a better life often leads to disappointment. True happiness isn't about status or wealth or finding someone you think is on your level. It's about genuine connection, mutual respect, and building a life based on honesty and love.